Yeah, thank you for introduction and thank you for opportunity to present on this conference. It's my first experience, so bear with me, please. And this is a presentation about opinionated way how to use effect within AWS Lambda. And this is a little bit agenda for today. So I start with introduction and then explain a little bit how to run a Lambda function within effect runtime. And also I will explain about how to use Effectful AWS SDK clients and maybe about future of Effect AWS. So this is about me. So I'm Victor Korzunin. So almost 10 years of experience in software engineering, and last 6 years I'm working with mostly serverless in AWS environment. So have quite experience with that. You also may know me as an author of Effect AWS, the Effect Kafka and serverless ES build plugin for serverless framework infrastructure as a code. Yeah, and yeah, I'm a self-taught software engineer, so my initial profession is day trader, actually, in Moscow Stock Exchange. Yeah, but now I'm software engineer. And let's start with motivation. So, yeah, first of all, as I mentioned, I have quite experience working with AWS. I started many Lambda functions, and I noticed the pattern. And also a couple years ago, I started working with FPTS and also Effect, obviously. And I noticed the pattern, how I use Effect with my Lambda functions. So, and I noticed that I repeat myself, and I decided to extract this to the separate package, to the monorepo. Actually, Effect AWS, it's monorepo. And yeah, and another point is that I wanted to make a migration experience from classic Lambda function to the effectful one as seamless as possible. So, and I want to start with basically, and the main idea was to just convince my colleagues to use Effect. So it's just a very simple migration. So let's start with a simple example. This is a classic Lambda handler. So you see that I'm using AWS Lambda here for importing the handler. This is actually the contract, the interface of AWS Lambda, which it accepts. Yeah, in this case it's SNS event. And yeah, I'm obviously just parsing the message. Then I create some helper classes here. It's Yahoo Code Client, MongoDB, and SNS event bus. And then I just fetch the price, update my database store, and publish event to the bus. Yeah, and this handler must be exported, obviously, to be properly handled by Lambda service. And let's this is the final handler, how it looks like. And let's deep dive a little bit how the handler interface look like. So this is the handler interface, the callback style, the classic one, the first implementation of the handler. And then AWS introduced the promise way, obviously. So it's yeah, and I wish AWS natively would work with Effect style like this, but it's not the case. It is why I implemented it for you. Effect handler with the effect type returned instead of promise. And let's come back to our code example. So actually so how to incrementally migrate this handler, classic handler to effectful one. We just replace our standard handler with the effect handler. As you can see, it's the same SNS event with the same response void, and also it has additional information like what kind of error could occur within this Lambda function and what kind of dependencies it has, right? And yeah, we wrap our handler with the generator function to make it effectful. And then we replace our helper classes with the corresponding tags in the interface. So now it becomes more portable and more abstract, right? And we replace our await code with the yield version of it. So absolutely the same business logic, and so the same readability and however, we need to run this handler somehow. So this is where we have the make Lambda adapter imported from the Effect AWS Lambda package. So we just wrap this effectful handler with this adapter, and it will convert it to the classic Lambda handler. We just export it normally, and it will be handled by Lambda service. However, it's not it yet, because as you remember, we used tags, and the Lambda function has dependencies like event bus, quote client, and instrument store. So it is why we need to provide a layer for this Lambda function, and we are providing it as so the make Lambda adapter has this overload function, which also accepts the global layer. So global layer means that actually this layer would be constructed on the cold start of the Lambda function. So as soon as you hit the Lambda function, it will run the acquire release process to actually it will run effect runtime, managed runtime against this layer, and it will spin up all the layer resources, and then and all these resources would be shared among multiple invocations of the same Lambda function while it's hot. And then as soon as Lambda service sends the signal to downscale the Lambda function, the resources will be gracefully shut down. I will let's continue with the graceful shutdown, because graceful shutdown has some caveat. So it will not work out of the box by default, because by default Lambda function is not subscribed to the seek term event emitted by Node.js. It is why it will not emit this. So we will not handle this graceful shutdown by default. So let's look a little bit how the life cycle, Lambda environment life cycle work. So this is the life cycle with the registered extension. So to actually enable graceful shutdown on the Lambda function, we need to attach any kind of layer which is an extension, and this extension will actually subscribe to the all necessary not native signals. So, and it is why this will work. So, and how the life cycle with the extension works. So first, when we hit our Lambda function, the extension would be initialized here. So here exactly the subscription to not native signals would be happen. Then runtime would be initialized. In this case, runtime is Node.js native provided by AWS runtime, and then the function itself would be also constructed. So at this point, we actually make the global layer, and as you can see, according to this diagram, it will be done once per cold start. So the cold start is when container is spinned up, and then as soon as many invokes you do, it will share the same Lambda global layer. And then when after certain amount of time of inactivity, Lambda service will send a signal to downscale the Lambda function, and runtime would be downscaled, and extension will be downscaled, shut down as well. At this point, it will emit a SIG-term event, and our layer would be gracefully shut down. So, and extension also give us a time to actually close all the resources properly, and this works nicely. So, and the easiest way to enable this is just using Lambda Insights extension. Is AWS provided extension. You just attach it to a Lambda function, and you're good to go. Yeah. But this is not the only way how to do this. And I want to introduce the AWS Lambda Effect custom runtime. So while I was preparing the slides, I actually got an idea. So it would be good to actually run our effect code natively. So you directly export the event handler, the effectful handler from your file. So this is the simple example. And what if we just directly export it from the file, and it will work somehow magically? Yes, it's possible. Actually, you can attach. So, and how it's possible? So let's come back to the diagram. So instead of constructing this global layer, we would construct it even earlier on the runtime init phase, right? So it is why we need to define a custom runtime for our Lambda function. So, and this AWS Lambda effect runtime, so it's just a custom implementation of runtime, which takes the provided runtime version of it. I use not binary inside and run the chunk of code related to the Lambda runtime to run all of this effectful handler, and it will run our code like normally, like it would done natively. Yeah. So what you need to do, you don't have to use now adapter for your effectful handler. You just export it directly, and then you build the AWS Lambda effect runtime yourself. You can. I will share all the links at the end, so you can look at it how it is implemented. So, but the idea, you build this layer yourself, you deploy it in your environment, and then you attach it to a Lambda function, and it will natively work with the effectful handlers. However, it's experimental. I don't recommend using it on production because it's not optimized. The cold start is longer and all of this because the native Node.js runtime from AWS was optimized for years. I just implemented for a couple of days. So it's just an example. I don't recommend using it. Yeah, so the benefits of using of a effect AWS Lambda, it's familiar interface. So instead of handler, you use effectful handler, and you're good to go with your business logic normally, like you would do with normal handler. Yeah, it's type safe because effect brings us next level of type safety, and this is benefits of effect itself. Shared effect runtime, mnemonic invocation, so it's more performance and more effective. So you just construct your layer once, and graceful shutdown, so it's also supported. Yeah, and your Lambda becomes portable and effectful. And yeah, I also wanted to briefly show you about what else Effect AWS monorepo has. Is actually the Effectful AWS SDK clients. This is the normal way how you would use AWS SDK client, right? And the difference now, you just import it from the Effect AWS client SNS instead, right? It's example of SNS, and you use the effectful version of it, right? You similar way you make the service instance, right? And then you use the method of this service. Or you can even use service accessor directly Yeah, I know it's maybe not recommended way due to possible dependency leakage, as yesterday on the workshop. Um, some people was see this examples, but still I like this because it's very concise. You just use it directly, and then you need to provide a layer actually. This package exposes a couple of layer options. The default layer, it's similar like creating a client instance with no arguments. And then you can use SNS layer, and you can provide some arguments to it, like region or logger, anything else. And you also can use the base layer. Base layer means that you can completely provide your custom client. It could be useful, for example, if you wrap your client with X-ray tracing and stuff like that. Yeah, and the most cool part about this, that actually the methods expose all the possible errors which could raise within this native SDK. And it's possible due to a code generator, which we are using to generate these clients. And AWS team exposes the manifest describing all the possible errors. They use this manifest for generating documents themselves, but we use this to generate actually effectful clients. And it's really useful because you can just directly handle your errors without looking to the documentation, and you deploy successful code from the first attempt, I hope. Yeah, future of the effect. It's not all the clients are generated currently. It's still manual work. So the generator itself is implemented, and thank you to Arthur Weber who contributed with that. We actually need to implement all of them, all the clients. Yeah, I also want to explore a little bit about tracing, X-ray tracing, to support FX spans, actually. Still working on it. Yeah, port some AWS Power Tools. So one of the Power Tools was ported is a logger, actually, Power Tools logger. And yeah, it's a nice set of live packages for working with AWS Lambda. And I want to port it to the Effectful version of them. And also create somehow some kind of middlewares for Effectful handler. And it's media inspiration. Media, it's a package for like it's middleware implementation for Lambda functions. So I would like to have such thing. Yeah, and many other things, but I need help. Please consider helping me, like hit the star, contributing, and like that. Yeah, and I want to actually pay some appreciation to the contributors. So some of them are in the audience, and especially Arthur Weber, who came up with the code generator solution. Yeah, and the Effect users, Effect AWS users. Yeah, that's cool to see adoption of them. And obviously the Effect team, without them, I wouldn't be here presenting this. Yeah, there is some links. You can access them by scanning this QR code. This QR code is to the presentation repository, and you can find links all there. Thank you very much.